London Real, sponsored by Bulletproof Coffee. Taking you off the boat for a second, I saw that your first movie was called The Virgin Trade, and it sounds like you spent a year in Thailand, in the brothels, and I just want to hear a little bit about it and wondering if that was a really hard thing to be a part of day in and day out, and if that got you down, or did it make you feel hopeful for some reason?
Both. I was there with my then girlfriend, who still has a sharehold in my business, which
Wow.
she's since moved on and had gone on to work on all the Harry Potter films. She's driving David Yates, the director, around in a golf buggy for a few years, and now she works on the Muppets movie and all these big 35 millimeter films. But we have a great social relationship now. But as a couple living in Thailand, making a film about the sex trade and the exploitation of some of the women there, that placed great pressure on us as a couple. And what we were filming really was the migration of young girls from rural Southeast Asia to Bangkok, where they're coerced into the sex trade. And Bangkok was often acting as a sort of central hub. So girls are, and if you'll excuse the crude terminology, but they're imported from poor areas and then they're exported to wealthy places like Japan or Europe. But what we didn't expect to find was that there was also quite a lot of men who would be very embarrassed by the prospect of them being seen walking hand in hand with a prostitute in London. But they're more than happy to be seen walking down the road holding hands with a girl who works in a bar somewhere in Bangkok. And often they fall in love. And often they marry and have children and live happily ever after. So it was much more of a grey area than we'd anticipated. We were going in as 21-year-olds who wanted to demonstrate...
Exploit.
Demonstrate the plight of all of these young girls.
Right.
I met some women who worked in a bank, but they didn't want to work in a bank anymore because they could earn more money working in a bar. The idea of prostitution is very black and white in Europe, that prostitution is a transaction. Anytime that money is involved, it is prostitution. In Thailand and in Southeast Asia more generally, it's much more about agency and control. So to a Thai woman, a prostitute is someone who is literally tied to a bed. And, this happens a lot less now in Thailand. The government has really come down hard on prostitution. But there were brothels, where women were literally, handcuffed to beds in abandoned hotels. And so if a woman chooses who she goes with, and frequently the girls will say, I'm not interested in that guy in the bars, then they don't view that as prostitution. They're making a willful choice. And so often also the age gap that you tend to see with older men with younger women is often viewed in Southeast Asia as more acceptable because there's a complementary idea there where a young woman can physically provide for an older man and he can financially provide for a younger woman. So
The Thais are interesting because they don't have this overarching morality that's kind of shoved down your throat in the West, where it's like this is wrong and this is right. And in Thailand, they've acknowledged the third sex, the ladyboy, as something for thousands of years. They're just like it's just something that happens, and then they don't seem to make moral judgments on the things that we do a lot of times.
Exactly, the ladyboys are they're sort of third sex, and boundaries are more fluid, I suppose. And that's what I actually I really loved about the place. It was very, very, met some incredibly open people, and the Thais were very, very welcoming. It was up in the hill tribes and in the north where we experienced the things that I found most traumatic and hard to deal with, and that's where there was great charities like DEP-DC working there to try and prevent young girls getting into prostitution, and often what you were finding was that. It was predominantly Japanese clientele who were coming over looking for virgins, and they would go up into the hill tribes, and there was these charities there that were providing contraception for girls because the HIV rates were still quite high in the hill tribes, and they were also teaching the girls Japanese. But you tended to find that a lot of the sponsors for those charities were US-based religious organizations, and they would remove the funding from said charities because they were just looking for people to outlaw the sex trade outright, to stop the sex trade. And you can't stop the sex trade. It's always been there. So what these charities were trying to do was provide the best conditions and working environments for the women involved. And I thought that was a fairly reasonable approach to take.
Is there a market for virgins? I mean, is there like some premium weird market out there?
Absolutely,
really?
Yeah. And as I say, it was predominantly what we found with Japanese clientele, but they
have the money, or maybe it's a cultural thing.
They'll pay a hell of a lot of money for some 14-year-old virgin in the hill tribes, and her value goes down after that.
Wow.
To the point where she's worth virtually nothing at all, and that's what's traumatic. The HIV rates have come down. Thailand, still to this date, as far as I know, is the only country that has a condom that is tailored to the Thai penis. Wow. You had a situation where the UK and the US were channeling massive amounts of free contraception and condoms to Thailand, but nobody was wearing them. And there was a half Scottish, half Thai gentleman who wanted to put some research into this and find out what on earth was going on. And so he paid lots of Thai prostitutes and bar girls to measure Thai penises, because everybody knows that if you submit data and you get people to fill a questionnaire, that they'll lie and they'll add an inch in girth and length. And so he paid these girls to get real statistics and real data, and found out that the reason that guys weren't wearing these condoms is because they were slipping off. So he said, okay, well, like, what's a Thai penis look like? And he found out the exact data for it, and they shaped the Thai condom to fit. And 3 years later, the HIV rates had dropped by like 70%.
That's innovation. Wow, I'm glad someone figured that out.
Yeah. They run a restaurant chain there called Cabbages and Condoms, and the idea was that still culturally in the hill tribes, people were embarrassed to talk about sex, so they had to make condoms as readily available as the cabbages in the market, which were the biggest vegetable that everybody ate. Okay. So you get a condom instead of an after dinner mint, and it's a very clever idea.
That's smart. Wow, didn't have to. This week, London Real meets UFC fighter Dan Hardy.
I'm not an athlete, I'm a fighter that's trying to be a martial artist.
His wins and his losses.
That's it, I'm done. I'm not enjoying it anymore. This is not fun for me anymore. I'm not getting anything out of it, I'm just getting damaged.
He talks the spirit world.
The thing is, like, ayahuasca doesn't necessarily do anything to change the person. It just helps the person understand who they are.
And introduces the wolf heart.
They want to feed the wires into my heart so they can measure the second heartbeat. So they can then burn it.
This Sunday, London Real presents Dan Hardy, Uncut.
Every subject's on the table, so feel free to ask away.